Good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming out on this rainy evening. My name's Sarah. I coordinate the events here at Burnside Library, and it's my pleasure to present another wonderful author for you.
Sorry, I'm pulling focus here, Sarah, forgive me. My colleague needs to take the brute bag. Sorry, darling. Yeah,
sorry, everyone.
You do good. I'm not here.
So, spoiler alert, Judy's here. I'd also like to say hello. We're actually live streaming this event to libraries in Ceduna and in Roxby Downs. They're two rural libraries that we run a grant to get equipment so we could live stream some of our events to them. So hello to all of you at Ceduna and Roxby, and thank you again for coming this evening. It's my pleasure to introduce to you an Australian literary icon this evening with a fantastic back catalogue of books. She's here tonight to talk about her latest book, Pilbara. Here is the fabulous Judy Nunn.
Oh no, I use this one. Oh dear. Oh, she's so very good at messing things up. I mean me. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Sarah. You're a doll. And sorry for messing it up. And hello to everybody. It's great to be in Burnside at Burnside Library with you all. Hello, Paul. Well, an old mate of mine here too. And also to say a big hello to all of those who are watching in the other libraries while we're being podcasted. Are we? It's live streamed. You can see I'm really with it, you see. I really am. But no, that's exciting. It was only just sprung on me. So hello to everybody. And thanks for fronting up in this not so, rather inclement weather. So, brave you. Good on you. Now, as Sarah said, I am to talk about my book called Pilbara. Guess where? Oh, you've got it. Good girl. Oh, hello.
Hello.
Oh, yes, I know you.
Yes, well, I'm your favourite fan.
Yeah, she's my favourite fan. I get that sometimes. People come up and say, they mean to say I'm your greatest fan, but every now and then they say, you're my greatest fan. It's so nice to meet you. This has been known to happen. And from people who watch television from ages ago, a couple of times I've actually had, didn't you used to be Judy Nunn? One time I said, yes, isn't it a pity that she's dead? And they actually went, oh no. That was a goodie. These things are known to happen. But anyway, as Sarah so rightly said, I'm here to talk about Pilbara, the book that you have. And guess where it's set? Pilbara. Yeah, a place known as the Pilbara. And as many of you will know, I'm quite sure, the Pilbara is in Western Australia, towards the north, just underneath the area called the Kimberley. And it is in actual fact one of the, if not the oldest places on Earth, being the first, geologically, the first land mass that rose out of the primordial sea, so to speak. So it is an extraordinary area to look at, to be in. And as I'm sure many of you also know, within those ancient rock structures there is a wealth of minerals, most particularly, of course, iron ore. So the Pilbara these days is associated with mining. I mean, think Gina Reinhardt, Hancock Mining, Rio Tinto, all those big fellas, and mining. But this book is actually not about these days. It's about the early settlement of the Pilbara. And when I say early, the first colonial settlement, which actually is quite a deal later than the big settlements of the various capital cities of the colonial states in that time, all of which were settled in the early the early part of the 19th century. But the Pilbara area was not settled until at least the mid the 1800s, like 1850, 1860 was when they were really flocking in. Now, by this stage, of course, all the early settlements were well and truly entrenched in British law, which makes the Pilbara something quite different, which is what attracted me very much to it as a setting for my book, because it was without a doubt the most lawless, brutal, gung-ho run type of place in the whole of the country. I have developed a sort of a theory on this, and I think because the colonial capital, of course, of that state of Western Australia was down south in Perth, where the British law was well and truly entrenched. Perth was actually first settled in 1829, quite a deal after the other colonial states. But that's still a great deal earlier than the 1860s. So I've got a feeling that I think because it was so rough and barren and that I think the colonial guys down south sort of thought, well, who the hell would want to go and live there in that godforsaken place? So when these gung-ho adventurers got there and sort of, you know, lied their way through and said, you know, I can handle this, I can run this place, I think the people down south actually gave them permission, which is saying something, because there was, to demonstrate this gung-ho attitude, there is a real bloke that I'd like to talk about just briefly, who doesn't actually physically appear in my book, but he certainly does feature because of the effect he has on other characters within the book. Now this bloke, this real bloke, was a fellow called Robert John Scholl, S-H-O-L-L, and he was, I'll reference this from my notes, he was actually government appointed as the resident administrator and magistrate of the area. This is a big area, the Pilbara, and yet where was his qualifications? He, a description of his career, which he boasted out on, reads like this. I've got to have it because there's so many things I can't remember them. He'd been an explorer, a journalist, a harbour master, a customs official, a postmaster, and a lay reader of the Anglican Church. Isn't that gorgeous? I don't know where you got that one from, but I mean, where amongst all of that is any legal qualification? I mean, and I don't think so. In other words, this bloke was, forgive me for saying it, he was a bullshit artist. That's exactly what he was. He knew how to just, So the authorities down there said, oh yes, you can be magistrate, you can run the courts. Why? How? But he had a great deal of influence over this vast area. And he comes into play in the earlier part of my book through the letters that he writes home, that my character, Geoffrey Burton, writes home, and he writes all about this Robert Scholl character. Now, Geoffrey Burton comes out in the 1860s, together with the early settlers, and he is of the landed gentry from Yorkshire, from a family estate called Pendleton Estate, not very far from Leeds. And he is a fellow adventurer, but as a farmer on this family estate, he's very attracted, as many settlers were in those colonial days, to the fact that the land there in the Pilbara for grazing land, for running cattle and sheep, is actually relatively very cheap compared to the rich pasture lands down south. So he comes out to set the Burton sheep and cattle station up and going and bring the Burton name to Western Australia, as many adventurers did. Now, of course, Robert Scholl takes one look at this rather classy gent and makes him one of his part-time wardens. And Robert Scholl did this. He created these wardens and these constables, etc., to go off and look after his various jurisdictions, go and arrest that mob, go and shoot this mob, go whatever, and also to rule as justice of the peace and stuff like that, these various wardens. So he takes one look at Geoffrey And he says, oh wow, Geoffrey writes home to his older brother William. This is only a tiny little quote from a letter. This is when we get to know about Robert Scholl. So Geoffrey writes home to his older brother, who is indeed the squire of Pendleton Estate, the family estate. And he says that this bloke describes himself as an entrepreneur, which is exactly what Scholl did. I'm an entrepreneur, you know, covers a lot of ground. And Geoffrey writes back to William, he's a larger-than-life fellow, and he says then to William, having been set up as a warden, that anyway, Robert has decided that as I happen to be a warden who actually does have a legal qualification, given my law degree from Oxford, I would make an ideal replacement for him while he attends a long overdue personal matters in Perth. Hence, for the next 3 months, I shall be acting government resident and magistrate. Oh, and William, I simply must tell you, Robert's laissez-faire attitude was never more evident than when I told him I'd never once practiced law. All the Burton men go to Oxford, I said. An Oxford degree is de rigueur, but we never end up practicing whatever profession it is that we study. We just go home to the family estate and become gentlemen farmers. Well, he roared with laughter when I said that. It mattered to him, not one whit. Who cares? He replied. You're well read. Make it up as you go along. I always have. And that's exactly what Scholl did and what these adventurers did. And this was what so attracted me to the Pilbara, this utter lawlessness. Now, moving on 20 years from when Geoffrey Burton it comes along, then there arrives his nephew, Charles. Charles is a young man, he's a widower with 3 young children in tow. And he's come out to take over or help with his uncle's cattle and sheep station, and he finds he's been landed with the similar duties just handed over to him by the likes of Scholl, and it's mainly because of his uncle's fault. His uncle Geoffrey has been paving the way for young Charles, you see, so he's blithely said, oh, Charles has all the wherewithal that I do, all the knowledge of the law, he's going to be a great asset to the area. Well, Charles has never even been to university, so he's been home tutored by his father, a very well-schooled man like Geoffrey, his father William the squire, and he's also had schooling from tutors. But no, he's been landed with this. So and he's made a justice of the peace. So when he's finally put to the test and he has to take on magisterial duties, he literally does have to fudge it. So I'll read you a scene here, which I'd like to, if that's okay, which demonstrates this. Now, in this scene, Charles and his station manager, interesting chap called Joe Lawson. I won't go into any more about that, but he's a very, very interesting fellow. And they are in the police quarters at Roban with Sergeant James Arthur Fry. Now, he's a big bloke, and he actually ends up becoming quite an ally of Charles. He's basically a good bloke, big, simple. He's the senior policeman in the whole area. Now, Sergeant Fry, together with Joe and Charles, he's just informed Charles that as the appointed Justice of the Peace, he is now called upon to perform magisterial duties. Charles is quite reluctant about this, but yes, of course, Sergeant. Charles glanced at Joe, who shook his head as if to say, can't help you here, old chap. You have the offenders in custody, I take it? Yeah, I do indeed, sir. They're all under supervision in Roban jail, but several are quite youthful and need to appear in court as soon as possible so that they can get on with their lives. He coughed uncomfortably, hoping that he hadn't sounded presumptuous. That is, if you haven't sentenced them back to jail. What are their charges? Thievery and assault, sir, apart from one that is a 15-year-old lad. What's his charge? Murder. Good God, Charles exclaimed, taken aback. 15 years old? Who did he murder? His father. Charles and Joe sat in silence as the sergeant went on to explain. Clifton Stroud, the deceased person, is, or more correctly was, Fry said, a damnable drunk. In fact, I'd say he was the second worst drunk in the whole of the Pilbara. The second worst? It was Joe who asked the obvious question. Who's the worst? Alwyn Stroud, the boy in custody. Good God, Charles exclaimed once again. Old Cliffy was a wild Welshman, and he began feeding the boy alcohol from when he was a little tyke, Fry continued, around 2 years old. And nowadays the boy's constantly drunk. The two of them would drink together day and night, and inevitably they'd argue, and it'd always end up with old Cliffy begging young Alwyn to shoot him because he didn't want to live on anymore. Shoot me, boyo, shoot me, he'd yell. Oh, I've locked them both up time and again for disturbing the peace. On and on they'd go. Their behaviour's been the talk of the town for I don't know how long. When is Alwyn going to shoot old Cliffy? People have been asking. What prompted him to do it finally? Sergeant Fry shrugged. Oh, I've asked the boy that question any number of times, but he can't answer. He's got no memory of the incident, you see. He's a mess and he cries constantly over his father's death. Alwyn's had no mother and no siblings for the whole of his life. His mum was Aboriginal and she died giving birth. He's never known family in any form. Hasn't even resided in a proper house, living with his father, mostly in the wild. Oh, I've no doubt the boy loved his dad. But something in his head finally snapped and he did as his father told him to do. Shot him in the head at point blank range. At 10 o'clock the following morning, Charles took his seat in the magistrate's chair on the bench in the Roban courthouse. Seated at the table below the bench was the police sergeant, and in the first row was Joe Lawson and a man with a mop and bucket who'd been cleaning the place until told by Fry to sit down. At the back of the court sat a number of wardens from Roban jail with their prisoners, each prisoner individually shackled. Police Sergeant Fry stood. All rise, he bellowed. The motley row of wardens and offenders rose to their feet, chains clinking. I declare this court is now in session. The Honourable Charles Burton, JP, presiding, Fry intoned, then looked to Charles. Are we ready to proceed, Your Worship? We are, Sergeant Fry. Further clinking as the motley crew sat. Proceed with your first case, Sergeant. Yes, Your Worship. The court calls Francis Morley. Fry turned towards a scrawny young man of Aboriginal appearance, not yet an adult, more a youth, really, indicating he should stand in front of Charles's bench. Your Worship, this young man is charged with stealing 3 cats from the Jubilee Hotel. Cats which the publican owned as pets. The animals have not been located. How do you plead? Guilty, the young man replied. What did you do with the cats? Charles asked. I ate them. Why did you do that? I was hungry. Charles closed his eyes briefly. Is this really happening, he wondered. English law in the Pilbara was nothing short of bewildering. Then, pointing a judicial finger at Francis Morley, he announced, it is the decision of this court that you proceed immediately to the Jubilee Hotel and apologise to the publican for stealing his cats. You are to remain at the hotel for 3 hours and assist the yardman with any work he requests you do, then you can go home. Several similar cases followed. Charles, realising that the sergeant was genuinely concerned for the welfare of these young men, or boys, more accurately, and mostly of mixed race, whom he'd been forced to place in custody in the ghastly confines of Roban Jail. It was here, in this terrible place, infamous throughout the entire region, that hundreds of men lived in appalling conditions and brutality was rife. Charles accepted pleas of guilty from the boys, and on the advice Sergeant Fry had offered the previous day, fined them each £1 sterling to be paid over 2 years. "You are now free to leave the court," he announced. After the boys had been unshackled and ushered away, Fry presented the final case. "And now, if it please the court," he gestured to the rear, and the remaining warder pushed forward a frail mixed-race Aboriginal boy of 15. Little more than a child, he stood before the bench, gazing up at Charles, trembling and red-eyed, a forlorn mess. "Owen Stroud," Fry intoned, "you are charged that on the Saturday, the 15th of this month, at the rear of the Victoria Hotel in the town of Roban, you did unlawfully kill and murder one Clifton Stroud by shooting him in the head. How do you plead?" Still looking up at Charles, the boy said, "Guilty, sir." "Sergeant Fry," Charles announced, "I am fully aware of the facts in this case and the circumstances surrounding them." "Yes, your worship." "I am bound by law to sentence Owen Stroud to death or imprisonment for this capital crime. I have decided upon this and believe a term of imprisonment will be appropriate. Therefore, Owen Stroud, I hereby sentence you to a term of imprisonment not exceeding the rising of this court." He stood. "And now, as there is no further business outstanding, I declare this court closed." "All rise," Fry bellowed. It wasn't until the afternoon, when he and Joe were in the dray making their way back to Burton Station, that Charles finally commented on the day's proceedings. "I simply cannot comprehend what occurred in Roban Courthouse this morning," he said. "Are we not in a colony of Queen Victoria's British Empire? Are we not subject to the rules of its law? How could that charade possibly have happened?" "I thought it went rather well," Joe Lawson smiled contentedly. "It was a Molière farce," Charles exclaimed. "An English court of law was appallingly disrespected. It simply won't do." "Oh, come along now, Charles, stop being so stuffy. Everything worked out perfectly. In fact, as you landed gentry might say, spiffingly." "Oh, do stop that," Charles snapped. "Stop what?" "Making fun of me." "I'm not, old man," Joe protested. "I'm deadly serious." And he was. "Today justice was served to the highest degree," he went on. "Everyone received precisely what they deserved. Fry could close the cases he's had in abeyance, and you have done your duty to the Crown. The whole charade, as you call it, was a display of sheer genius." Annoying as Joe could be, this time Charles knew he was right. Both men fell silent as the horses, sensing their home nearing, quickened their pace. In the back of the dray, scrawny legs dangling over the rear, Owen Stroud gazed about at the quiet surrounds and wondered what was to become of him. So, oh, Auntie Sweet, thank you. It's very nice. As you can see, that is the absolute gung-ho lawlessness of it. But as you can also see in this particular instance, Charles is a kind human being who is aware of the ghastliness. Owen Stroud would certainly have died in that dreadful Roman jail. As we all know, any empire that invades whatever area of the world they invade, not just the Brits, but you know, you try the Dutch, the Spanish, the French, the local inhabitants, the indigenous people of wherever these empires have taken over, suffer appallingly, as we all know. And Charles, although like any settler out there to you know, raise cattle and sheep and take the land, they don't think, oh wow, I'm taking a human being's land. I'm sorry, but that's not the way colonialism worked in those days. So we have to accept that. But Charles, obviously being the good human being he is, can see exactly what would have been lined up for that young Aboriginal kid. The way the Indigenous people were treated in the Pilbara was truly appalling, and particularly the Roban courthouse was shocking. They wore coffles around their necks, iron thing around their necks, around their ankles, and they're chained together like beasts of burden, and they're worked to death, building the roads and the structures and all of that. So, I mean, poor little Olwen would certainly have been a dead man. So Charles is obviously a human being with a heart. So anyway, this Burton station, a sheep and cattle station that the Burton family, Geoffrey Burton, Charles' uncle, has started, is actually 10 miles, we deal in miles then, of course, about 10 miles east of Roban, which is the major township there, and 7 miles south of that, of Roban, is the port town of Cossack, smaller town, but a port town. And being a port town, believe you me, rough as all get out. And I think I can safely say actually that Cossack was a chief, well, the Pilbara was the chief inspiration for me, but most particularly Cossack. You see, this is the second book that I've actually placed in the Pilbara area. A previous book, I had been to the Pilbara to research it, and I was researching there in 2006 for a book that was then published the following year, 2007, called Flood Tide, and a big section of it was based around the Pilbara, and it was actually, that book of mine was based in the 1970s with the big influx, the discovery of iron ore and the big mining taking place. So that was far more modern than this current book that I've written. But when I was researching, I took my husband, Bruce Venables, actor, writer, extraordinaire. We're a bit, you know, we're joined at the hip, so we go everywhere together, and Bruce is a great help. But also I took my big brother Rob, several years older than me, and the reason big brother Rob came with me is because back in the actual 1970s, when I was placing that book, Rob had been an environmentalist working in the Pilbara for Woodside Mining, one of the first of the big companies that set up mining in that area. So he was obviously the ideal research bloke. He lived there for a number of years with his wife and young children at the time. So we got there, the three of us, and Rob said, oh, you have to come and see the old port town of Cossack. You know, its history is fantastic. So off we went to see this port town of Cossack, but there was no town of Cossack. It was a ghost town. You couldn't even call it a ghost town because there was only one major building there that was a total wreck that had once been the courthouse, and others were just rubble everywhere. There was a little graveyard called the Japanese graveyard, but for mostly for Asian, the pearl divers, etc. And there was a European little rundown graveyard, and all the rest was absolute rubble. But the history of that little port town was extraordinary. The old stone wharf was there, and it was the funny little stone wharf because actually, although it was the port town of all of that wealth of industry that was happening there, because there was gold mining, there was pearling, there was the early settlers, it was a shallow, it was at the mouth of the Harding River. And the big boats delivering the livestock and the people and taking all the wool and the shipping outside, they all had to anchor offshore. And all of this conveying was done via lighters, via just, you know, light dinghies sort of thing. So, but as Rob said, Cossack turned out to be so fascinating. During his time there with the little kids, the big thing that parents would do with little kids is they'd go fossicking in Cossack. Doesn't it sound great? Let's get the kids and go fossicking in Cossack. I love that, because they would turn up this whole previous life from the mid-19th century. There'd be opium pipes or utensils and kitchenware or little kiddies' dolls or something. Always, and it just showed the wealth of activity that had been there and the wealth of different nationalities that had worked there. And so I discovered, and Brucey, of course, said to me, he said, "Gee, Jude, this would be a great place to set a book here in those days." I said, "Bruce, I'm already setting a book here in the 1970s. Now you're a writer, you go off and you write that book." Well, he never did, of course, because he's a lazy sod. Isn't that right, Paul? Yes. Please. Very funny man, great fun. Good to, but he's a lazy sod. So anyway, that idea of visiting this place in the peak of its fame and notoriety and everything just stayed wandering around in my brain. And it was only a couple of years ago I had this idea that was going to be character driven, and I knew that I wanted this character to go to the toughest, most brutal, most lawless place in the country. And so, where did I think of immediately? The Pilbara, and most specifically Cossack as that port town with the history that it had. So I went back just last year and did further research on Cossack, and would you believe Cossack had been reborn? I mean, Cossack was not the whole town, admittedly, but it's run by, it's called a heritage museum town, and it's run by the local Nalama people. And it's not just a sort of pioneer settlement that, you know, you could just, you know, tap it and it'll all fall down. No, cheapo. It's made out of the original old bluestone rock. The courthouse is now grand, it's all there. And there's other, the big buildings, the Bodden store, the jail, the post office, and I thought, oh, isn't that nice, you did this just for me. Well, they didn't actually, but I could wander around and I could think, yeah, because I got a scene there in a jail cell, and I was standing in this weeny little jail cell made out of all this original old stone and everything, and I'm thinking, crikey. Anyway, it was wonderful, and so that was very, very inspirational to me. Now I'm going to, can you put up with another little reading, give you a little example of Cossack? Okay, lots of nods, aren't she gorgeous? So anyway, now this is moving on a bit in the development of the characters here. At this stage, now I said Charles had arrived with his 3 younger children. This has moved on. Now his oldest child is his daughter, Victoria. Victoria is she's a weird one. I fell in love with Victoria, but she's highly, highly intelligent. Even at 16, she is actually teaching English to some of the workers in Cossack. Their bosses need them to have a better command of English. So she's stood up to be counted and said, well, I'll do that. Only 1 day a week, and of course she has to stay in the lodgings during night. She's not allowed to go out in Cossack at night. But Victoria is a very willful girl. She has decided now she is going to venture out at night. Right, okay, sorry, that's the first bit. So here we go. So she changed from her schoolgirl teacher, her school teacher navy blue, into her riding trousers and rough shirt. Best not to advertise her gender, she decided. As a passing glance, people would presume she was a man. And just to be safe, she took her cloth shoulder bag with the Enfield revolver its weight resting reassuringly by her side. Then, while the lodgers were dining, she crept downstairs. A quick look up and down Perseverance Street assured her the town was relatively quiet, as she had presumed it would be, and intending to avoid the central area with its lights and its pubs, she turned right and set off on her way out of Cossack. She passed the Malay camp on her left, and then beyond that, the Chinatown tents to her right, knowing that just 100 yards further would see her free altogether from the township and alone on the sandy soil of the foreshore. Once there, she made her way down to the old wharf, where it stood on the river's edge, a marine light marking its presence. People rarely came near the place at night. Seating herself on a mooring bollard at the wharf's edge, she marvelled at the stillness of the night. The gentlest breeze came off the water, relieving the stifling heat of the evening. Good God, even now in the middle of the dry season, which would be winter to those down south, it was hot up here in the Pilbara. But so very beautiful, she thought, looking out over the tangled growth of mangroves silhouetted in the moonlight and listening to the gentle lap of the water. Then suddenly, and with a sense of shock, she realised she was not alone. She'd heard something. What was it? A cough, a man's cough. And then something else. Another man. Another man laughed. The sounds were coming from behind the storage shed, not 20 yards away. Victoria stood, instinctively reaching into her cloth bag, her hand wrapping itself around the handle of the Enfield revolver. She would quietly steal away, she decided. To stay might well be to court trouble. She turned to go, but then heard a voice, a child's voice, raised in protest, a cry, perhaps of pain. "Who's there?" she called. Scuffling noises and mutters reached her through the darkness. Then the outline of a man appeared from behind the shed. Well, what do you think you're doing here, lad?" he called. "No business of yours, sir," she answered, feeling her pulse quicken. What were these men up to? Her voice was the giveaway. "Ah, not a lad at all, I see." The man came nearer, squinting for a closer view of her, and where she stood in both the marine light and the moonlight, he could see her clear as day. My, what do we have here?" he slurred lasciviously. "What a looker you are, missy." He was well drunk, she could tell. As he spoke, a young Aboriginal girl, no more than 9 or 10 years old, darted out from behind the shed. She ran straight past the man and then straight past Victoria and threw herself off the wharf into the river. Victoria gazed about her, alarmed. The child had disappeared altogether. She could see nothing but the moon's reflection rippling on the now ruffled water's surface. What had happened to the girl? What was she to do? "Don't worry about her, darling," the man said dismissively. "She's black. They can swim like fish. She's headed for her mob's camp on the other side of the river. It's low tide, what's more. She'll swim it easy." But she was only a child, Victoria muttered in outraged disbelief. "How could you—" "She's a black," the man snapped. "A heathen. She was getting no more than she deserved. Or she was about to, that is—" Victoria noticed his gaze shift to over her shoulder. "That is, until you interfered." "I take it your friend has now circled behind me and is approaching my back," she said. "Whatever gave you that idea, darling?" His grin was malevolent. "But it happens to be right. Oh, my lovely, you are now in a lot of trouble." He was all but licking his lips in anticipation. "I'm afraid I must contradict you." Victoria drew the Enfield from her shoulder bag. Not for 1 second had her hand relinquished its grip. She raised the revolver and aimed the barrel directly at the man's head. "It is you who is in trouble. You and your friend." She tilted her head as if listening intently. "Your friend, who I sense has lost his nerve and is thinking of running away," she added. She smiled as she heard the man run off. "Oh dear, now you're alone. How sad." "You slut!" Sweat instantly beading, the man tried to bluff his way through the abject fear that now fell upon him. "You filthy slut! What do you think?" "Turn your back and get down on your knees." Victoria's voice was as cold as ice. The man did so, terrified, realising just how much trouble he was in. This girl was going to kill him. He'd seen the murderous look in her eyes. He wanted to run. He wanted desperately to run away like his brother Arnie, but his body was frozen to the earth as he knelt motionless, waiting for the inevitable bullet. Victoria marched up behind him and swung her arm with all the strength she could muster, sending the magazine of the heavy revolver crashing into the side of his skull. Then she stood back and watched his unconscious form drop to the ground, where it began bleeding into the dirt. She returned the Enfield to her shoulder bag, knelt and felt the man's pulse. He was alive, and there didn't appear to be copious amounts of blood, although it was difficult to tell in the dark. She would leave him here to be discovered in the morning, either dead or alive. He might bleed out through the night, but she didn't particularly care. Men like him didn't deserve to live anyway. "What sort of vile people are you?" she thought as she took her leave. "This place attracts the very dregs of humanity." So it's a touch of Cossack for you, and a touch. Thank you, it's very sweet. But it's also a touch of Victoria. Never quite sure where some of my characters come from, and that's one. I mean, the editors in it and my publishers, they wanted to give a lot more reason into Victoria that, oh my gosh, for a young girl coming from landed gentry in Yorkshire, family estate of Pendleton, it's the Pilbara that did that to her, isn't it? And I sort of thought, no, I don't really want to go on about what made Victoria the way she is. I think Victoria was just born like that.
Absolutely.
Maybe a touch of psychopathic in her, but no, she is a young woman who is so very solid with who she is, what she can achieve. She can do anything a man can do. She's so this is a modern element that is in this book, despite the fact that it is set in the mid-19th century, in the 1800s. There's another character that I consider very, very modern in the form of a woman called Eleanor Witterson. Now, Eleanor Witterson, she's huge in the first third of the book, part one, and she comes back later on too. She's actually a courtesan, which in London, which is not unheard of in the London of the 19th century, but she's one with really quite a difference. She is in actual fact the reason why Charles has come to the Pilbara to work on his uncle's farm and make as much money as he can to repay the family debt that has been incurred at Pendleton Estate by his father, absolutely due to the influence of Eleanor Witterson. So as you can imagine, Charles loathes Eleanor Witterson and considers her evil. I don't actually. She's a strange character because she's very classy, and William, as Charles's father, the Squire of Pendleton, has fallen desperately, very much in love with her. He's a very straight, square, honourable man, and he believes that Eleanor is the respectable widow that she professes to be. And he proposes and wants her to become the mistress of Pendleton, the family estate. I mean, and if she's a courtesan and she's approaching 40, you'd think she'd grab it with both hands, wouldn't you? But she doesn't, you see. She knocks it back because she doesn't want to live in the country. She is a city girl. She wants the social life and everything that London affords her. But she's not going to miss out on anything either. Again, she is a very, very strong woman, and she knows how to find her place in a man's world, and she does just that. So both Victoria and Eleanor Widdowson, to my mind, although they wouldn't even know what the term meant, they really are in their own way. They're feminists. They can rise above what the world of those days is automatically going to hand them and expect of them. So it's always the characters that I get carried away with when I'm writing. I must say it's the same when I'm reading, really. I love character-driven novels. So it's a very good idea to have a good story, I do admit. Good. But it's the characters, once they grab me and, you know, take me on their ride, I'm just hooked. So I think on the strength of that, we might go to some Q&A. What do you reckon? Anybody want to put up their hand and either yell it out if you've got a strong voice, or otherwise Sarah will come galloping with a mic, whichever you like.
Any questions?
Yeah.
Have we got any coming through from Roxby or Ceduna? Not yet.
Ceduna, gee, I was in Ceduna when I was, a former book of mine called Maralinga. Ceduna, yeah, fascinating place, hey?
I've heard that in Western Australia they had people called the protectors who reigned over the Aboriginal people, who they could marry, where they could live, what they could do. They were very destructive and horrible. Did the Pilbara have that as well? The one that I heard about was more in the south. But
Yeah, no, the Pilbara didn't. No, you see the protectors, the WA protector, did anybody see The Rabbit Proof Fence?
Yes.
The movie? A great film. Richard Branagh playing the real character, who was the WA protector at the time. Now they thought they were doing the right thing, you see, so they stolen generation, and they would examine the children and to see how white their skin was. And then they would qualify to go off and live with the family and become their servant or something. Now, I've seen that film several times, and one time I saw it. It was NAIDOC Day.
NAIDOC Week, yeah.
NAIDOC Day. Yeah, and they asked me along. This is in Sydney, and they asked me along to this NAIDOC big thing. It was at Darling Harbour. And there were about 200 people there. Only about 3 of us were white, but many looked white. They were Aboriginal people. And there is this scene and they showed that scene. And I'm watching it with all of these Aboriginal people who, on first glance, might look white. And there is this scene where Kenneth Branagh, as the WA protector, is examining the kids, and those who are just lightly tanned and not black pass muster. Then he puts up this is in the film, and there are these demonstrations which really they're real pictures of real people, and there is the completely original First Nations Indigenous woman there, really black, and she's married a white person or has cohabited with white person, and then you have a picture of the next generation, that child, and the child is much paler skinned, and then that child has married or partnered with another white person, and then you have the third generation virtually appears white. And this is what the protector, Kenneth Branagh playing the protector, the real protector, said was what the wonderful things they were doing for the Aboriginal people, they were whitening them. Yeah. Because you don't get throwbacks like you do with many other black races. Their colour is bled out. As if just by bleeding out the actual colour, you're going to get rid of the Aboriginality. I mean, their whole culture, their whole everything. I mean, and I'm watching that with all of these Aboriginal people, most of whom look white. You've no idea how chilling that was. It was the most amazing thing. Sorry, I tend to get carried away. But no, that was extraordinary. Mm. Yes, anybody else? Yeah, right down the front here, yellow.
Do you have another book in the works?
Do I have another book in the works? You're a slave driver, crack the whip, you know. Yeah. Look, I do have an idea, which I'm not going to tell anybody, of course. But yeah, only really got carried away with this particular idea just very recently. In the first few meetings I was doing out on this road trip, I would have quite honestly said, nope, have no idea. But I do now. Isn't that good? Yeah. Yes.
What's a writing day like for you? Do you write all day? Do you just write in the morning? You know, yeah. How do you,
Look,
do you write?
a writing day does vary. Yeah. I mean, an ideal day for me is have my brekkie, read the news, and then look over the previous day's work, and don't do it until after lunch. It's all I edit as I go. So the previous day's work will be the morning, then I'll take a lunch break and I'll read somebody else. It's my way to get my head in somebody else's work. And then in the afternoon, off I go and I write new stuff. Then come 5 o'clock, it's time for the first glass of wine and the stuff gets terrific. That's why I have to edit the following morning. Yeah. Anybody else?
You write some fabulous stories. I tell you, I've read all of them except this one.
I know you have because we've had some contact.
Yes, my granddaughter here.
Yes, you got in touch with me. I recognise you from the photos.
Yes.
Gorgeous to meet you.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Is there anybody from wherever we're like Seduna? Oh, come on, somebody from Seduna ask a question.
Come on, Sajuna. Question for Judy. Anything? Nothing yet, Josh.
You've got great librarians there in Seduna too. That's the other thing you always do when you're researching a book. You go straight to the library. You know, anybody researching a book loves librarians. Yeah.
Hi, Judy. What was the inspiration to choose near Leeds? Like the why? Like
Sure. Yeah. I'll tell you why.
I was born there.
Oh, were you? No, hang on. At the back here. All right. I am in my acknowledgements. I am deeply indebted to my good friend Chris Dawson, or should I say Christopher John Dawson, 32nd Squire of Weston Hall, Yorkshire. Thanks, Chris, for so generously sharing with me the detail of your ancestral home and history, all of which was invaluable. So actually my estate of Pendleton is based upon Chris's Weston Hall, Yorkshire. He is still the squire.
Lovely.
Yeah, he's absolutely gorgeous bloke. And he gave me a whole account of, a whole thesis that a person has done upon his squirearchy, squiredom and all that. So that's why.
Okay, so if there aren't any more questions, I'd just like for us all to thank Judy for coming along this evening.
Thank you, you've all been lovely. Thank you very much.
We've got lovely Tricia at the back there from Harry Hartog, Burnside, who's got copies of Pilbara, but also some of Judy's other work as well. So if you wanted to take the opportunity to buy a copy, you can this evening. And Judy, Judy, I'm sure doesn't mind signing. If you've got a copy that you'd like signed, then by all means come and see Judy at the front here. Thank you for joining us on Ghana Land this evening. Please help yourself to a cup of tea or coffee before you go if you wish. Thanks again for coming. Hopefully we'll see you at another event soon. Thank you.
Thank you.